This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali's Dogon village leaders describe how attackers shot dead 95 people and burnt houses. Kenya closes border with Somalia in Lamu as anti-terror security operations intensify. And UK's candidates for the Prime Minister's job campaign on a platform of smooth Brexit. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Panina joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you, Karen. Coming up in business news tonight, Ethiopia's economy is projected to expand by 9% this year. And India's Bharti Airtel agrees to pay $26 million to end an ownership dispute with Tanzania's government. I'll have details of those stories and plenty more others in just a bit. For now, Karen, back to you.
Thank you very much, Panina. Let's start in South Sudan. Its government says that the suspension of Sudan from the African Union won't affect Juba's peace process. Sudan is one of the guarantors of South Sudan's peace deal signed by rival parties last September. CGTN's Patrick Hoyt now reports.
Sudan's suspension from the African Union means it can no longer remain a guarantor of South Sudan's peace agreement. Juba says it will now consult with the East African regional body known as IGAD and the African Union on what needs to be done.
This agreement had appointed Sudan and Uganda to be the partners who will be in charge of the implementation. Now Sudan is suspended. It is the IGAD and the AU that will tell us what will be the way forward.
South Sudan depends on oil to fund 98% of its budget. That oil flows through Sudan to get to the international market. So political instability there has an impact on South Sudan's economy.
Sudan has been also a helping hand for Juba, particularly in marketing the oil and also in promoting the economic interests of South Sudan. So if that government, which is holding to the economic power of Juba, is isolated internationally, and also if sanctions followed on them based on that isolation, the effect will become clearer on South Sudan.
South Sudan's opposition leader and designated Vice President Riek Machar resides in Khartoum. Riek says he will only return to South Sudan upon formation of a would-be unity government scheduled for November this year. President Salva Kiir has offered to mediate a transition in Sudan but hasn't received a response from Khartoum. Many in Juba believe stability in Khartoum will make a lasting peace in South Sudan more likely. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
In Sudan, pro-democracy protest leaders on Saturday called on citizens to take part in acts of civil disobedience. The move to shut down the capital, Khartoum, was in a bid to put pressure on the Transitional Military Council to hand over power, following Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's visit on Friday. CGTN's Chao Magono now reports.
A campaign of civil disobedience to demand civilian rule has left the streets of Sudan's capital largely deserted. Opposition and protest groups called for workers to stay at home after security forces stormed the protest camp on the 3rd of June. Some residents expressed their support as the military's deadly dispersal made them fear for their lives and property.
All that we are asking for, the life we are asking for, is just to live in safety. One doesn't have to suffer to get a piece of bread. One doesn't have to be afraid for oneself or one's car.
Of course, the civil disobedience harms the country, but it is still needed at this stage. People have suffered a lot, and if they do not do this, then the revolution is wasted.
On the first day of the campaign, although some state banks and public utility offices were open, public transport was barely functioning, and most commercial banks, private companies, and markets were shut.
The current stance is that the revolution is ongoing and that the peaceful methods of resistance continue. I believe that the revolutionary road taken since December will reach its goal in the end, maybe tonight, a month from now, or even a year from now. That does not matter. What matters is that the will of the Sudanese people remains unbroken.
While citizens remain largely indoors, protesters have been taken to the streets in several neighborhoods amid heavy security.
We therefore ask those who have blocked roads using stones to open them for the interests of patients. Sometimes patients face complications due to difficulty getting to health establishments.
There is no end date as yet for the mass general strike. At least 113 people have been killed and more than 500 wounded since the deadly protester crackdown. Chombono, CGTN.
Now to Mali, where President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has urged the nation to remain calm after an attack on a village in central Mali left at least 95 people dead. This is the latest violence to strike the North African nation. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. The massacre took place in the Dogon community, where in recent months there have been clashes with Fulani herders and jihadist groups. Clashes between them have increased since a militant Islamist uprising in northern Mali in 2012. Well, we are now joined by Dr. Amechi Nwokolo, a security analyst at the Roman Institute of Security Studies based in Abuja. Thank you very much for joining us. The last 3 to 4 days have seen a huge number of deaths across the region, from Mali to Burkina Faso. What's driving the rising clashes, would you say?
Thank you very much. It's nice to also be with you here. Not only Mali and Burkina Faso, I think on Sunday as well, there was this attack, which we always refer to in Nigeria as bandit attack in Zamfara again. A lot of people, I think about 20-25 were killed. And as you said, we are seeing an increase in escalation of jihadist movement around the Sahel Savannah, around the sub-region. That is what is actually that is causing and escalating this killing here and there. In Burkina Faso, you know that a jihadist group called Ansaru has been linked to the attack in Burkina Faso. Even though that of Mali has not been really, they've not come out to claim the people who caused the attack. But it's also feared that it's linked to a kind of reprisal by some Fulani groups that had one of their members or somebody killed some time ago. So you are seeing that often being repeated in different parts of the sub-region right now. And it's a bit very worrisome for us.
So this region, it's obviously you're painting a picture, it's very insecure there. How can this situation be resolved?
Yeah, the problem really lies in our leaders in the sub-region. Our leaders, those that has been elected into places to govern the people, to provide security for the safety of life and property. But unfortunately, if you study the West African, especially the sub-region politics, I think that is where some of this thing is emanating from, where religion and politics is, you cannot separate the difference in some parts of West Africa. That is what is causing this. And it weakens leadership, because in such situation, they find it difficult to come out openly, you know, maybe bringing to book those that are causing this thing, because they feel that sometimes these people are one of the people that have helped them to power. And that's one of the things. the issue of religion and politics in the sub-region is one of the things that is giving credence to the kind of carnage that we are having, because those in power, those that have been elected by the influence of religion, now find it difficult to really prosecute those that are carrying out this attack, to, you know, punish them openly, and that is one of the things that is giving them credence.
Let's talk a bit more about these jihadist groups that are behind the majority of these frequent and deadly attacks. What would you say they want, and what needs to be done to stop or at least reduce the attacks? I know you said there's weak leadership, but tell us more about what they want as well.
Yeah. Yeah, what they are wanting is not different from what ISIS is asking for, to create a caliphate, to create a Sharia state where they will have the pure Islam will be practiced. You understand? It's not different from what the Taliban is asking for. So these are the things that you see them, that they are hoping that someday they are going to achieve. The Ansari that you heard about, they are already linked with ISIS now. And so many of these guys who are coming back from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Syria and all that, where ISIS has been defeated in the open insurgency. They're coming back to West Africa now, trying to see that being a very vulnerable environment, weak leadership here and there, and weak states, you know, and states that are sliding into state failure, they think that, oh, we can use that opportunity to create, in reality, that caliphate that, you know, that failed to stand in Iraq, that failed to stand in Syria. Probably someday they will find. And if you know some of the things that we are talking about in sub-Saharan Africa, because of weak leadership, poor governance, we have so many ungoverned areas that these guys are hoping they are going to take advantage of and create this caliphate. That is their main goal.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Dr. Amaechi Nwokolo there, a security analyst at the Roman Institute of Security Studies based in Abuja. Moving on to other news now, Kenya has closed its border with Somalia in Lamu indefinitely as security operations against al-Shabaab militants intensify. Kenya has also prohibited residents living in the border villages from any cross-border trade with Somalia. This specific border point is one of 4 border crossings between the two neighbours. Kenya has in the past few months taken steps against Somalia in what analysts say is a move to pressure Mogadishu over the maritime demarcation that is currently before the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Somali government officials were weeks ago denied entry into Kenya. In response, Somalia has called on Kenya to commit to a peaceful resolution of differences rather than use such tactics. Well, to get more on this, we are now joined by an analyst on Somali affairs, Abdi Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad in Nairobi, with us here in the studio, and CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo in Mogadishu. So let's begin with you, Abdulaziz. Abdulaziz in Mogadishu. Is the Somalia government taking this as purely a security move, especially given that what has been going on with the maritime border dispute, would you say?
Well, Karen, as you've said, Kenya shares a long and a porous border with Somalia on both sea and land. And the latest directive, even though the Somali government has not yet formally commented on the statement, but from the looks of things, this statement came from a county official, police official in Kenya who issued that directive. It doesn't seem to have come from the official channel of diplomacy towards the Somali government. But then again, this issue has been forthcoming, the issue of border between the two countries. On most occasions, Kenya has resulted in closing the border on Mandera as well as Lamu on previous occasions. And as we know, last week they issued a similar directive advising the fishing communities in the coastal cities of Kenya not to fish along the border with Somalia. So the Somali government, even though sees security as a top priority, especially along the border where the two countries share a joint cooperation agreement where cross-border trade works both sides. Kenyan traders bring their goods to Somalia and Somali traders bring their goods to the other side. Then the Somali government doesn't see this as a right measure, and it all adds up to the months of tension that has been brewing over the past few months over the maritime dispute court case in the ICJ, that the verdict is being expected to be given probably in October or early next year. And until the verdict is given, Somali authorities here are rather silent on the moves that Kenya has taken in the past few months, including banning senior government officials from entering Kenya, and now the trade border dispute, the trade between the both sides that has been cancelled. So the Somali government says that it wants the case resolved, and after it is resolved, that is the only time it's going to start oil drilling and gas exercise along the demarcation borders.
Okay, thank you, Abdulaziz. We will return to you in a moment. Now, let's return to you in the studio. This is you are Abdi Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad. You're a professor a doctor in Nairobi. Let's talk about this action by Kenya to close the Lamu border. What do you make of it?
According to the version of the Kenyan security agencies, there is what they call a fake goodies or expired food items are coming from other side of the border. In addition to that, there is also human and drug trafficking along the border area. That's why the Kenya are very much concerned about the safety and security of the border communities, so that they have to have a precaution, so that they have to make sure the stability and peace of that part of the country will be protected. That's the version of the Kenyan stories. In addition to that, as you're aware, there is what they call a maritime dispute between Somalia and Kenya as well. In Africa, for instance, it's not the first country who has a similar dispute between the Ivory Coast and Ghana, between the Nigeria and Cameroon, between DRC Congo and Angola, and between Malawi and Tanzania. So this kind of things normally is it's a common in Africa, but I don't think so that will affect what they call the living standard of the border communities.
And what about the ban on the cross-border trade between the Kenyan villages in Lamu and the Somalian side? You don't think it's going to affect people too much?
It will affect to some degree, because it will affect the living standard of the border communities. Because, as you're aware, there is a lot of good, cheap goods are coming from that side of Somalia. In addition to that, also there's a lot of goods coming from the other side of Kenya going into Somalia. So definitely it will affect the living standard of the community. But that doesn't mean, it will affect the entire, border communities. At least they can minimize what you call the effect between the two communities. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to return to you in a moment and talk more about the maritime border issue. But now we will return to Abdulaziz Billo, who is in Mogadishu for us. What do you see as the intended impact on this border issue?
Well, Karen, the issue at hand right now, where Kenya is shutting its border to Somalia, might provoke a negative reaction here on the side of the Somali government. We understand that there's a joint cooperation agreement between the two countries in terms of cross-border trade, in terms of security. We have Kenyan troops operating along the border between Somalia and Kenya. So for now, the cooperation agreement still stands between the two countries, and it was renewed 3 months ago in the border town of Mandera, where the Somali Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Awad Isse and the Kenyan counterpart Monica Juma met in Mandera to formalize the agreement and to ensure that no loopholes are there, and the trade between the two countries and in terms of security cooperation is still intact. So Somalia doesn't see this as a good move at this moment. But then again, the tension between between the two countries, even though Somalia has called for a dialogue and to resolve the latest disputes. But it all came from the oil and gas conference that took place in February 2019 in London, where Kenya accused Somalia of auctioning oil and gas blocks in a disputed territory along the Indian Ocean that the two countries are contesting. Now, until the issue is resolved at the International Court of Justice, Somalia says that it remains committed to working alongside Kenya in terms of security to ensure that Al-Shabaab doesn't attack and cause deadly attacks rather inside Kenya. So the cooperation still stands on the Somali side, and they're expecting that Kenya will come back to dialogue and stop taking these preemptive measures, including banning government officials and ensuring that planes coming from Somalia continue to fly directly to Nairobi and are not stopped for security checks in Wajir. So the issue is quite complicated, but for now, government officials here in Somalia are keeping silent about this matter.
Okay, thank you very much. That was CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo there in Mogadishu. Returning to you, Abdi Wahab, Sheikh Abdi Samad. Yes, so the recent standoff between Kenya and Somalia on the maritime border issue, which obviously Abdulaziz has been referring to, it's a very complicated issue. How is that affecting the collaboration, would you say, between the two neighbours in their war against Al-Shabaab?
Let me give you a clear picture. You know, according to the, Somali version, the land should be what they call a 90 degree to the southeast. While the Kenya also, they want the line to be what they call parallel to the latitude, almost, Kenya, the area, the border in conflict is almost 100,000 kilometers square. From Hobyo to Kismayo, according to Somali version of his stories, they auctioned 202 blocks. From Hobyo to Kismayo is 56 blocks. Out of the 56 blocks, only 3 are in dispute or 4 in dispute. So each block can generate 1 million barrels per day, which means Somalia can generate one block $24 billion. In other words, according to what you call the corporate tax and other things, it can generate $40 billion US dollars. From Hobyo to Kismayo is 55 trillion, petroleum barrel per day. In addition to that, no question about that. As we speak right now, there's a significant number of the AMISOM peacekeeping forces. Some of them are KDF inside Somalia, which fighting against the common enemy, which is Al-Shabaab. So I don't think so. The border, the conflict between Somalia and Kenya will be out of hand, because both of them, they are facing their common enemy, which is what they call Al-Shabaab. So that I don't think so that will affect the fight against Al-Shabaab. Both countries now, they are willing to resolve the problem, because they're going to dialogue. They're going to sit together, harmonize the views, and resolve the problem once and for all.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. An analyst on Somali affairs, Abdi Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Democratic Republic of Congo declares measles epidemic after 87,000 people are diagnosed with the disease.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Andrea Leadsom, one of the candidates vying to replace British Prime Minister Theresa May, said on Tuesday that she would seek a managed Brexit, but that leaving the European Union on October the 31st was a hard red line. As she launched her campaign, she added that the next Prime Minister must have a clear plan to manage the exit by the end of October, with preparations that would bring minimal disruption.
Now, I campaigned passionately for the UK to leave the EU, and I continue to believe that a superb future awaits us. But the truth is that over the last 3 years, politics has failed dismally. It has failed to deliver on the biggest democratic decision in our history. Fulfilling that democratic decision is now urgent and vital. It cannot and will not be put off any longer. Leaving the EU on the 31st of October is, for me, a hard red line.
One of the 10 candidates there. The Ministry of Health in the Democratic Republic of Congo has declared a measles epidemic that has claimed 1,500 lives since the beginning of the year. Most of the victims are children under 5 years old. CG10's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
The national declaration of the measles epidemic comes as the country also battles a deadly Ebola outbreak in the east. Authorities have recorded 87,000 cases of measles since the start of the year. Aid agencies fear the epidemic may be the deadliest since its resurgence in the country in 2011. International health experts are working with the Congolese government to cut the chain of transmission by vaccinating people. The disease has been reported in 23 of the country's 26 provinces. Officials say a vaccination program targeting 1.5 million people will begin in the next few days. Measles is a highly contagious disease that mainly affects children, but it can be prevented by vaccines. The recurrence of the disease in the DRC is mainly attributed to the low immunization coverage, irregular supply of vaccines, and a weak surveillance system. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Nigeria is one of dozens of countries hoping to learn lessons from China to boost its tourism industry. The 2019 China Tourism and Cultural Week aims to strengthen cultural ties between China and the rest of the world, as well as helping to develop tourism through indigenous arts and crafts. This year's theme is China Beyond Your Imagination. Phil Haza reports now from Nigeria's event in Abuja.
The national anthems of Nigeria and China indicate the start of the 2019 China Tourism Cultural Week in Nigeria, an event where Nigeria hopes to learn from China's tourism success. This year, a delegation from China's Hainan province will showcase features of the Chinese city. They'll also help train selected artists and tourism experts in Nigeria. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's art, entertainment and tourism sector accounts for 34% of the country's GDP and about 20% of employment. Although the country is faced with challenges like insecurity and poor infrastructure, which affect the tourism industry's ability to grow, experts say that sector can and will thrive.
Every country has its own challenges. This sector is a sector that will save this country, in fact, save Africa. You see, the more people you empower, from the downtrodden, the more you reduce unemployment, you reduce crime, you reduce unnecessary friction. So to me, we're taking serious and close advantage of building on empowering our people with this new structure.
The partnership with China is also geared towards strengthening bilateral and economic relations worth around $10 billion annually.
This initiative serves as a platform to promote cultural exchanges between both countries. The hope is that Nigeria takes advantage of this handshake from China to advance its arts, culture and tourism industry.
China side really want to help Nigeria further in the field of capacity building. Later, we warmly welcome 3 or 5 or 6 or even 10 people to form a delegation to visit China to learn. And we will do our best to help. And I think from this aspect, it will help, it will create more job opportunity. It will really benefit local people.
Tourism experts from both countries exchange indigenous treasures, but the real value of this week will be if Nigeria can learn lessons from China and grow its tourism industry. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's now go to Penina for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Business, Ethiopia's economy is projected to expand by 9% this year. And India's Bharti Airtel agrees to pay $26 million to end an ownership dispute with Tanzania's government.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's begin in Ethiopia. The economy is projected to grow by 9% in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. This is according to the country's Finance Minister Ahmed Shide. Addressing lawmakers during a parliamentary session, Shide proposed $13.48 billion in government spending for 2019-2020 fiscal year, which is a 12% increase from last year. Lawmakers from the ruling coalition, who dominate parliament, are expected to approve the plans over the next few weeks. The International Monetary Fund projected the country's growth for 2019 at 7.7% in April. The country is on track in achieving ambitious reforms led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. These include proposals to open up the state-owned telecoms firm and the national carrier Ethiopian Airlines to private investors. India's Bharti Airtel has agreed to pay $26 million over 5 years and cancel debt to resolve a dispute over ownership of its Airtel Tanzania unit with the country's government. Bharti Airtel has also cancelled $407 million of debt owed to it by Airtel Tanzania as part of the settlement. The Indian firm was drawn into a dispute with Dar es Salaam in 2017 over ownership of the mobile operator after President John Magufuli said it was fully owned by state-run Tanzania Telecommunications Company. Magufuli insisted that the state-run company had been cheated out of its shares through an irregular privatization process. After prolonged negotiations, the two sides in January signed a settlement that included Bharti Airtel agreeing to increase the government's stake in the company from 40% to 49%. Bharti Airtel says it hopes the deal would give the company a fresh start. Uganda is the latest member of the East African Community after Tanzania to stop the use of the Kenyan currency. The Bank of Uganda advised Ugandan banks to subject all flows from and into Kenya to enhanced due diligence, noting that changing Kenyan currency from old to new banknotes can only be done in Kenya. This is in an effort to stop its banks from being used to launder stolen money back into Kenya. The Central Bank of Kenya announced plans to withdraw the old 1,000 Kenya shilling notes from circulation to combat illicit financial flows and counterfeits. The Ugandan lender says the move was necessitated after the CBK informed it that it had issued a new series of banknotes effective May 31st. Kenya Airways is willing to operate under state-owned holding company after the troubled airline failed in its bid to jointly run the country's main airport. Lawmakers in the East African nation in May rejected the airline's proposal to operate Jomo Kenyatta International Airport with the state-owned Kenya Airports Authority. The two firms are expected to issue alternative proposals. According to the carrier's chairman, Michael Joseph, these could include the partial nationalization of Kenya Airways. The airline, which reported a $59 million full-year loss, is proposing a model similar to Emirates Airline and Ethiopian Airlines Enterprise, which operate as units of state-owned holding companies. Such an arrangement would enable it to double its fleet in 5 years. China is ready to negotiate a trade deal with the East African community. It is looking to address complaints that the six-nation East Africa trade bloc is operating huge trade imbalances with the region. CGTN's Terry Wangari explains.
China is ready to negotiate a trade deal with the six-nation East Africa community to address Kenya's complaints about a huge trade imbalance in favor of China. Kenyan officials said the government is yet to discuss a free trade agreement as it fears a surge of imports from China, but that a partial deal might be possible. Chinese Ambassador Wu Peng said Beijing was ready to open trade talks with the East African country, guided by World Trade Organization rules.
Africa has the capacity and the ability to reach their self-reliance development. We, as a foreigner or as a friend and partner, just want to give them assistance, of course, under the request of African countries.
China has become one of the biggest trading partners for many East African countries, but their exports to the world's second biggest economy are dwarfed by imports of manufactured goods like electronics and plant equipment. Kenya imported goods worth $3.67 billion from China last year, while exporting just $112 million worth of goods there.
Kenya needs industrialization, just as the HE president said in the Big Four agenda. Only through industrialization, Kenya can reduce the import and then have the capacity to export.
Officials at Kenya's Trade and Industrialization Ministry say the government is seeking a preferential, non-reciprocal trade deal giving Kenyan exports duty-free access to China. Such a scheme could be modeled on the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which allows African exports like apparel and textiles duty-free access to the U.S. market.
I think what we need is policies beyond just the politics. And the policies would then regulate how Kenya or the East Africa region interacts with China as far as even infrastructure development is concerned, the knowledge transfer, the technological know-how, because without clear policies, obviously then of course China can always bring their experts to fix things, and then they go away, and then when things go bad, again you have to call the Chinese.
The Kenyan government has borrowed from China in recent years to build roads and railways. It's also part of China's Belt and Road Initiative aimed at upgrading land and maritime trade routes between China and Europe, Asia, and Africa. With China extending its hand for negotiations, it's hoped that a level trading ground will eventually be reached, not just for Kenya, but for the rest of East Africa. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
The largest global association of applied economists and a raft of international banks and other advisory bodies are warning of a slowdown in the U.S. economy. It's all due, they say, to protective trade measures from Washington. Take a listen.
Washington's tariffs and trade protectionism could cost the American economy serious money. Applied economists and policymakers from the National Association for Business Economics, based in Washington, D.C., has issued a report expecting the U.S. economy to lose steam in 2019. The report estimates a 15% chance of recession this year, with the probability of contraction rising a staggering 60% by the end of 2020 if trade relations don't improve.
If we have tariffs applied on all imports from China, which includes a lot of consumer goods, then you would start to see much larger effects on the U.S. economy.
Economists say ultimately it's the American consumer and especially low-income households who will bear the burden of U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. With consumption accounting for 2/3 of the American economy, levies at the border are particularly worrisome.
When you get into the 25% category, if you're a U.S. importer, there's no way to ameliorate that type of effect through administrative effects or structural changes to your supply chain. You're going to have to pass those prices on to consumers.
Tariffs and the threat of them may not be the only storm clouds looming over the United States. The fading stimulative effects of tax cuts and weakening investment are also casting their shadows over the world's largest economy. That's prompting investors to race into safe haven assets such as U.S. Treasuries.
If businesses are pulling back on investment, deciding to delay investment plans, then that in itself leads to reduced activity and in turn leads to reduced GDP growth.
A slew of global banks and advisory bodies have cut their forecast for U.S. economic growth. JP Morgan Chase slashed its second quarter forecast for U.S. economic growth by 1.25 percentage points to 1%. Oxford Economics lowered its estimate from 1.6 to 1.3%, and Barclays Banks from 2.2 to 2%. Morgan Stanley, meanwhile, says a global recession could occur in 3 quarters if Washington escalates its trade war. Michelle Vandenberg, CGTN.
Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Information Communications Technology, Mr. Joseph Musheru, paid a visit to CGTN's Africa Bureau in Nairobi today. He discussed CGTN's importance on the African continent in delivering impartial and important news coverage of Africa. The Cabinet Secretary commented on the close ties between the Chinese and Kenyan governments and said that the country will continue supporting CGTN's mission on the continent. The Cabinet Secretary praised CGTN as a pioneer in Africa in portraying Africa's realities in a positive way. The CS said the government is committed in supporting CGTN's hosting of the Continental Bureau in Nairobi. CGTN's Africa Bureau Chief Mr. Huang Cheng said the Bureau was happy to receive the CS and look forward to continued collaboration. CGTN Africa began broadcasting in 2011 and broadcasts daily current affairs news, Faces of Africa, business news, and talk shows on African affairs. In China, hair products enterprises in Shaoyang City have developed into an industry worth $1.2 billion. In the first 5 months this year, the total export value of hair products has reached $8.36 million, of which 80% were exported to Africa. In 2008, it achieved export earnings of $45 million. At present, there are more than 130 hair products enterprises in Shaoyang. More than 90 of them are above designated size, employing more than 100,000 people. The products cover more than 3,000 varieties of 3 series, hair bundles, wigs, and hair accessories.
We plan to open retail outlets in cities across Africa and sell our products to all corners of the world.
African customers' demand for these products are now soaring. The added value is 2 to 3 times higher than traditional products.
Robots and automation have made inroads into the food industry, and now they're taking on perhaps America's most popular food, the hamburger. Mark New has the details.
At San Francisco's Creator Restaurant, big lunch crowds line up to taste a burger made by a one-of-a-kind chef. The bun is sliced and toasted as it slowly makes a precisely timed journey before sauces drip onto the bread. Then come the vegetables. Fresh pickles, tomatoes, onions, and lettuce are all sliced crisp to order. The robotic system then sprinkles fresh grated cheese and seasonings on top. During this time, the system has been grinding, shaping, and cooking the patty, which it delivers into a box. Not a single human hand has touched the gourmet burger until it's served fresh and hot to the customer.
I got Cora C.
Super impressed, like seeing all the mechanism of it, like moving down the conveyor belt. It's not just a simple like little conveyor belt that you see. They're like pushing it. I think it's really awesome.
And these aren't just ordinary burgers. For example, this one, the Mission Street Food Burger, was designed with the help of a local chef, Anthony Mint. It's got some pretty fancy ingredients too, like black sesame seeds, charred scallion garum. Let's give it a try. My burgers certainly got unique flavors, and many customers like these guys have come back for more numerous times.
I don't know, man. I think this is better than a human-made burger. I've had a lot of human-made burgers, and they just season the meat a lot better.
Customer Li Zhu thinks the burgers are about the same quality as other restaurants, but more affordable since it saves money on labor.
Right, the price is good though. $6 for a burger, that's really good. We could make burgers automated. We could probably make like packaging and other services automated as well.
I might get the tamami burger.
Customer Francis Bosbos is curious about the blend of human and robotic labor. He's actually a former cook who says he left the food industry because it was a tiring job with poor benefits.
Good place to have just to see how efficient. I think when you're stacked up with the best, you want to do your best. So if you see robots doing it under like 4 minutes, you want to be a better cook, right? It's an uncertain but delicious future.
Currently, Creator is only open during lunch hours 3 days a week, as the restaurant continues to fine-tune the experience based on customer feedback on the new chef in town. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
We shall leave it there for now, but ahead on global business, global leaders converge in Geneva, Switzerland to mark the 100th anniversary of the International Labour Organization. We'll be live in Geneva to get more insights into the conversations that are taking place there. That's at the top of the hour. For now, Karen, back to you.
Thank you very much, Panina. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including this year's Eid festivities in Egypt register best performances for the film industry.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now head to Egypt, where Islamic Eid festivities are considered one of the most important times of the year for the movie industry in the North African country. Films are released on the first day to ensure high sales at the box office. Yasser Hakim highlights how films during this year's Eid have differed from previous years.
It's been a record-breaking week. 3 films out of the 7 released have led the charts in this year's Eid. But Casablanca, an action movie starring Amir Carrara and mostly filmed in Morocco, has been the front runner.
حقق رقم قياسي على مستوى الإيراد اليومي.
Casablanca broke the record for the highest revenue per day in Egypt. On the first day of release, the movie brought in 6 million Egyptian pounds, which is about $360,000. That's a record here. The previous record was last year's Eid, with 4 million Egyptian pounds, about $240,000. Casablanca is a hit because of the great action scenes between Egypt and Morocco. It includes popular stars like Gada Adel, Ayat Nasser and Amar Gelil. And the lead is Amir Carrara, who's the new star for the young generation.
النموذج الشكلي للبطل الهيرو.
وراد المكسيك اللي غطس في الموج العالي والبحر بلع. ورحمة المكسيك.
The best season for Egyptian movies is the Eid festivities and the summer vacation. High-budget films are usually released in this period, and they have been impressive this year.
I'm here to watch The Path and Casablanca. The feedback is good about both, so I chose those 2 films to attend this week.
This is the first time I go to the theater since the first day of Eid. The movies are packed, like you can see. It's proof of the huge success of the films this year.
But this year has witnessed a new genre that hasn't been in the theaters for decades, and that's a war movie. The film Al-Mamar, or The Path, starring Ahmed Izz and a host of stars. Al-Mamar, or The Path, is about the war of attrition in 1967. It tells the story of the war through the eyes of a number of soldiers and a journalist during a challenging period of Egypt's modern history. The movie is directed by renowned Sharif Arafah.
It's a different movie. The first war film since 1999. That's 20 years ago. It's an important film that shows the heroics of our armed forces. I highly recommend it because we miss these types of movies.
All foreign films are usually replaced by Egyptian movies in theaters during Eid. But this year, 2 American films survived and are competing with the local movies: The Avengers and Aladdin, that stars an American-Egyptian, Mina Masood, as Aladdin, alongside Will Smith and Naomi Scott. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The world's highest post office is in northern India and has turned out to be a tourist hotspot with people from different parts of the country visiting the place. The post office, which opened in 1983, is located at a height of 14,567 feet. Tourists coming to the place feel a sense of achievement on reaching it and often buy stamps to serve as souvenirs. Well, the small post office connects the villages in the area to the rest of the country. However, due to heavy snowfall during winter, the post office usually remains shut. Postmaster Rinchen Sharing, who's been there since the beginning, delivers letters to other towns of the state from where they're taken to other destinations.
We are at the highest post office of the world in Hikim. This is located at around 15,000 feet. It is a very big experience. We come from Mumbai, where the temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. The temperature here is at 17 to 18 degrees Celsius. The overall experience is very good.
Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the sports news coming up, including Kenya's Harambee Stars name their 23-man squad for their Africa Cup of Nations campaign.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kenya national team Harambee Stars coach Sebastian Migne has named the final squad for the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. 4 players have been omitted from an initial 27-man squad in the Paris camp, among them Christopher Mbamba, who has failed to recover from an ankle injury that he picked up in his last match before checking into camp. Brian Mandela also injured his knee in Monday morning's training session and has been ruled out of the tournament, while Clifton Miheso and Anthony Akumu have failed to make the cut. The team is getting set for their final pre-AFCON friendly match against the Democratic Republic of Congo, set to be played on Saturday in Spain. Stars will then head to Egypt 5 days before their opening match against Algeria.
Playing against Algeria, Senegal and Tanzania, they're a good team, you know, we cannot underrate them. And we just have to prepare good and because if we have to take each and every game at a time, because football is all about 90 minutes, I think we're going to do good and we are going to surprise a lot of people. For me, I want to achieve something with the management, with everyone in the squad and my colleagues. At least we have a target, you know, if we make it to the quarters, if we make it to the semis, because nothing is impossible.
Tunisia head coach Alain Giresse has been taking his team through its final preparations ahead of this month's Africa Cup of Nations. The Eagles of Carthage play 3 friendly matches before travelling to Egypt. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has more from Tunis.
Tunisia football team has gathered in Tunis on Saturday.
The official preparation for Africa Cup of Nations AFCON 2019 in Egypt kicked off.
The second match will be in Croatia on June 11th, and then we'll take on Burundi on June 17th in Tunis.
Alain Giresse took into consideration the injured players like midfielder Mohamed Amin Ben Amr. In addition, defender Siem Ben Youssef has retired from international competition. The domestic league players will join the team next week.
I've had to deal with all these constraints while creating my list and preparation plan. During the first friendly match, Tunisia only has 14 players available. They might be on the final list of 23. We'll complete the team with 7 youth from the Olympic team in order to have enough players.
Tunisia will play Angola, Mali and Mauritania in Group E of the Africa Cup of Nations.
In modern football, there are no big or small teams because all African football federations provide good preparation conditions. Tunisia needs a cohesive team which is determined to win. Nothing is guaranteed in AFCON.
AFCON 2019 in Egypt will be Tunisia's 19th participation in this continental tournament. Football analysts say the Eagles of Carthage will have to put everything they have in the final if they dream of winning the tournament they last hosted and won in 2004. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis, Tunisia.
To Italian football news now. AS Roma have appointed Paulo Fonseca